How's it going, guys? Back with another video, and today we're continuing the Around the World in 100 Films challenge, and we're focusing on the country of Armenia. Now, there were a number of films I was considering, but again, because this was an ex-Soviet country, a lot of the movies I was seeing were actually made in Russia, or the language used there was Russian, so couldn't really select those movies, and I ended up choosing a movie called Calendar, which was made in 1993 by the director of Atam Agyan. And he's done a few movies in the States. He's mostly known in the States for movies like Chloe and The Captive. And he made a smaller film that's exclusively well known in the Criterion community known as Exotica. And this is the film that came with that. It was one of his earlier films. And for me personally, I think this is more of his experimental and kind of personal film for himself. Earlier film definitely had more limitations, but definitely an interesting film. For those that don't know, this is a movie about a photographer who travels with his wife to Armenia, and he's photographing various churches for a calendar project. And the relationship between the wife and the husband is dividing, especially once they get to the country. She's more of a native to Armenia and he's not, so he's slowly starting to feel disconnected, especially with this travel guide who also speaks Armenian, so he feels a little left out. Now, why I say it's a personal project for the director, which is why this movie is a little more fascinating than the actual story itself, is because he was born in Egypt and he grew up in Canada, and his Armenian culture was kind of left to the side, and he never really knew it and he never really identified with it. And much the same is to say about myself, half Armenian, and never really knew that side. So I think I was drawn to this story because of that, because it's a movie that's trying to find identity, coming back to a place that you don't know and trying to fit in to that specific community. The movie obviously takes place in Armenia, so those scenes that when we were going and exploring the churches and the area around, definitely great to look at. The story itself is interesting because of that personal backstory, and it's just interesting seeing the disconnect and the marriage, spoiler alert, I guess falling apart the more we go into this movie, the further, and seeing the connection the wife is having with the tour guide. Now, there's always one thing that I never really understood, which was he was sent to Armenia for a photography project, but he's taking video the whole time. So that aspect I never really understood. There's translation that is not great. Like, this movie is in Armenian, in Russian, and in English. And if you don't know Russian or Armenian, this movie sometimes is a little difficult to understand because they don't provide either the right translations for some of it or even subtitles. So even knowing Russian, the Armenian parts were a little difficult to figure out. So definitely an experimental film. There's different cameras being used. Quality difference isn't great sometimes. Like I said, the translation isn't great at times. But this is more of a personal project. Definitely a movie that he was just stepping into and kind of figuring out. This movie was shot in 10 days. I think you know, you can kind of tell some areas that was the case. But nonetheless, a very interesting movie, and one that I do recommend for cinephiles and people who also like the film Exotica. It comes with the movie, so do check it out when you get a chance. I'm going to be giving Calendar a 3.25 out of 5-star rating. One of the things that I do like about this film is it's kind of a fly-in-the-wall kind of situation where you're just following along these characters. It's very relaxing and it feels very organic. And that's a compliment for this film because a lot of it feels like a documentary footage. I almost was like, did he really have these problems with his wife? And I looked it up later, and, you know, because he is still married to his wife, and I was like, oh, this, you know, this stuff is fiction, but this is like an alternate universe for him addressing personal problems. So a solid film about disconnect and isolation, has its problems, but I admire the effort put into this film. With that being said, that is my review of Calendar. If you have seen this film, if you have any other Armenian films you'd like me to check out, please do comment them down below in the comment section. Would be very curious to check those films out. Please do hit that like and subscription bar down below, and of course I will see you next month for another movie, and we'll continue this challenge once again. See you guys.